The next Premier of Nova Scotia, John Savage.
That was the scene on May 25th, a night of great joy and optimism for Liberals in Nova Scotia. Since then, the hard realities of governing, even with a huge majority, have sunk in. Joining us tonight to talk about successes and failures, Nova Scotia Premier John Savage. He's with Steve Murphy. Steve?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for coming in, Premier. Do you have any opinion on the question du jour, the legalization of prostitution? Are you in favor of that?
I'm very much in favor of attacking the two bad people in that, who are the Johns and the customers.
Haven't we been doing that unsuccessfully?
Not successfully.
So go after the consumer.
Go after the consumer and the people who make the most money out of it, and stop banging the women in the sense of injuring them.
Are you prepared to compel police to do that? Are you able to do that?
Well, we have to look at budgets, which we always say these days.
Leads very nicely to the questions I had on this paper. A man stopped me on the street on the way to work this morning. This is true.
Right.
Nice gentleman from Cape Breton, a taxpayer in Nova Scotia. He told me that John Savage has proven himself a wolf in sheep's clothing, that after campaigning as a lamb, he is chopping and hacking like a lion. Is that true?
Some of it is true. Some of it, unfortunately, is what we've got to do. We did not bargain. If you'd asked me that I would be doing what I'm doing now before the election, I would have laughed at you.
I did ask you that.
Yes, and I would probably laugh at you then.
You didn't laugh, but you denied it. You denied specifically that it would be necessary for you to do what Don Cameron said he would do, but that's exactly what you've done.
But the issue basically was quite simple. I was faced with the decision of either allowing the province to continue into the real slump in which we would have gone over $600 or $700 million in debt, or else I had to make a decision about taxes.
But you,
that was basically as a result.
With the greatest of respect.
But that was basically as a result of the withdrawal of the extra money that we had anticipated from the federal government.
But Premier, with great respect, you are now doing what Donald Cameron said he would do.
Yes, but we're doing a lot more than what Donald Cameron said he would do.
Well, he was tossed out of office.
We're making
He was
decisions.
tossed out of office, presumably, at least in part, because people didn't want this.
We're making decisions that people are now respecting, purely and simply because they should have been made 5 or 10 years ago.
Yes, but is there not a trust issue here? You didn't talk about slashing and cutting and raising taxes. Au contraire, you promised no tax increase.
We promised that we would give good government. And what we're giving basically is good leadership, dealing with government reform, looking at what we have to do to put this province back on its feet.
But weren't you elected under false pretenses? You didn't promise any of what you've done. Your opponent promised to do much of what you've done, and he was trounced.
The agenda that we set was changed by the mess that we inherited. You know that, and I know that.
Well, yes, but why didn't you know that or suspect that before you got elected?
Did you know there were $2 billion of debt added in the last 2 years?
Well, certainly there were a lot of people who suspected the picture was not very rosy.
Yes, but
and that it would be necessary for you to do all the things you said you didn't think you'd have to do.
The $2 billion of debt, nobody knew.
But don't you think people are tired of this rhetoric? You know, the rhetoric that says the situation is worse than we thought.
It's not rhetoric. It is the absolute truth. And you know and I know that this province is in the most perilous financial position it's ever been in.
But Premier,
and whether you like it, or I like it, or they like it, we're in a mess.
But Premier,
and what we need, regardless...
No,
it's not rhetoric.
It is rhetoric now
it's hard,
because
cold truth.
At the time you were campaigning, you would not even entertain questions about what it is now that you're forced to do, or that you say you're forced to do.
Sure.
So doesn't that ring hollow to taxpayers?
The hollowness would have been a lot worse if we had allowed this province to slip into the perilous position. We're the second worst province financially in the country. We have a debt that is only exceeded by one Newfoundland. And we have a responsibility as a government to say, yes, we would love to do all those things that we promised we would do. But we don't have the money to do it, and we want to save this province for you and your children and your children's children. And if we don't do that, then we're not governing.
But don't you feel that you have broken faith with the people who voted for you?
I don't think we've broken faith because what I said was, at that time, an unwise remark. I freely admit that. I've said that to Liberals at the weekend. I've said it to all kinds of people, and I know that.
Yes. This is the I'm sorry for the tax increase.
Yes. But it's necessary to say that.
But are you apologizing for making a promise
No.
that you couldn't keep, or for making a promise that you probably suspected you couldn't keep even when you made it?
No, the issue was made in good faith. What we discovered was that we couldn't face the people of Nova Scotia unless we said to them, we've got to put taxes up, we've got to get an extra 70, 80, almost $100 million, and we have no choice. And if I said to you that the shame of breaking a promise and not allowing that was worse, then I would be letting down Nova Scotians. I know Nova Scotians don't like this now. But come back in 4 years and ask us what they think in 4 years when we get this province on the right path.
Allow me to ask you specifically about hospital cuts, and we only have about 40 seconds. I'll tell you that before I ask the question. Do you believe that Nova Scotians, and in particularly Nova Scotians who may be in the metropolitan Halifax-Dartmouth area, want the government to cut back the VG hospital?
It isn't a question of whether they want to. It's a question of having to do what we have to do with a budget that has to be cut. There is no question that there are major cuts that have to be made. We think, given next year's budget, that we can address the real issue of health care, which is putting back into the people's homes, putting into their areas and their neighborhoods health care, and deinstitutionalizing health care.
But that means laying off people in the big hospitals.
This year, because of the budget position we were in, we have no choice to do what we've had to do. But remember, we're not laying them off. It's the Nova Scotia and it's the VG.
But that's a distinction that politicians make. People don't make that distinction.
No, but be fair now. If we have on-hands management, it's up to us to do it, as we did with civil servants, and as we will be doing with civil servants in the upcoming year.
Fair enough.
But we're meeting with the unions, we're talking to the unions. In this case, this is the VG hospital, which is not our responsibility in terms of management. But you mark my words, 4 years' time, it'll be different.
Are you sure you still want this job?
Sure.
John Savage, thanks for coming in. Premier of Nova Scotia, the Honourable John Savage.